Question now is that part 4 stand part. Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Chairman, I want to put a couple of questions that I raised in my first speech on part 1 to the Minister. I note that he hasn't taken a call in the odd hour that we've been debating this, and I think there's been a bit of barracking from the other side, but no actual substantive speech about the legislation. It's in respect to the amendments in respect of charities, the amendments to the Charities Act 2005. Now, I said previously that the committee on both sides of the House, to be fair, labelled long and hard as we went through these provisions to ensure that whilst we are all in favour of transparency and accountability and appropriate accounting standards with charities, we all acknowledged, I think, that many charities are made up vastly of volunteers, many very varying sizes, who have varying capabilities in terms of administrative and accounting control functions. And as I say, whilst we were keen to ensure that there were appropriate standards and levels of transparency, we were also keen to ensure that we weren't overburdening charitable organisations with bureaucracy, with compliance cost, because many of our charities, Cancer Society, Salvation Army, others, do pride themselves on the donations that are provided by the public, the vast majority going directly to the stakeholders that require it, whether it be medical research, whether it be assisting those less fortunate, and not being sucked up into onerous administrative requirements. I do note, though, sir, in clause 42B, there are some very substantial penalties for those who do fail to comply. And I quote, "A charitable entity and every officer of a charitable entity commits an offence and is liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding $50,000 if the financial statements of the charity referred to fail to comply with the relevant standards in summary, and the charity entity or officer, as the case may be, knows at the time that the financial statements accompanying the annual return, when it is sent or delivered under section 41, that the financial statements fail to comply." Now, no one would disagree with that in terms of somebody knowingly committing an offence and knowingly contravening not only the legislation but their obligations. But what I'd like to hear from the Minister is the view he has from the submissions which presumably he has read, as we did on the committee, as to whether he still believes that those penalties, substantial as they are at the right level, are pitched and are appropriate. Further to that, and as importantly, the transitional provisions in clause 78, 1 and 2. There has to be appropriate levels of transitional provisions, more so, I think, for the charitable sector. We had, I recall, churches and others. Many of the churches have individual entities. They're not one conglomeration. They are individual incorporated societies or entities around parishes or whatever. And the transition to moving to these standards, even though from memory there was substantial support for them to further professionalise the financial standards and transparency of charities, for many of those organisations there will be a substantial transition. It will not be, as a business, if you like, one entity transitioning across. It will be many entities and sub-entities within those charitable organisations. So I'd be grateful if the Minister would look to take a call and, just for the record in this committee stage, for the future, give us some assurances around those two issues.
Mr. Chair, just a quick call, just a couple of issues.